Here at Future Leaders Early Learning Center, this building received over $3 million. Hello, how are you? I would like to see if I could bring little Joey, my son little Joey here. Is there paperwork or can I check out the daycare? No? Why can't I check out the daycare? Okay, but if can I get paperwork or anything to submit my son little Joey to come in here to daycare? We'd really like to put Joey in this daycare. We've heard great things.
Business card?
No, I would like your business card actually.
We'll talk to you later.
Okay, can I speak with somebody? Where are the children at? Are there children here today?
No.
No children.
Yeah.
Why are there no children?
Yeah, two of next time.
Would my son little Joey have friends to play with here?
No.
No. No friends for little Joey.
Yes. Sorry.
Dang it. Well, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
So, little Joey would not be accepted to that daycare.
Joey's still homeless.
Joey's still looking for daycare.
And because little Joey couldn't get into a daycare, we went to an autism center, as they have been popping up everywhere as a rise of autism has occurred here in Minnesota because of the government funds that they're receiving. I tried to check my son Joey into an autism center.
We've been going to a lot of these daycare centers. We're trying to find a spot for our little boy Joey, but we thought maybe we could check him in the autism center because none of the daycare centers are open. Yeah, and how many kids do you guys have at this autism center?
I can't give you a number now.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So we got to talk about a massive update on the Somali fraud investigation happening out in Minneapolis, Minnesota by the federal government, because we were told by the mainstream liberal media and leftists that Nick Shirley's work as an independent journalist in Minneapolis, Minnesota was just racism, hate, and bigotry, right? Him going door to door to these daycares, to these allegedly fraudulent facilities and asking questions about the funding and whether or not they're actually legitimate establishments. Well, that was illegitimate, right? That he didn't actually really discover any fraud. He didn't really do any real journalism, right? This is what we were told by the mainstream liberal media and leftists and haters.
CNN is looking into Shirley's claims.
Hi, my name's Whitney Wild. I'm a correspondent for CNN.
We reached out to several of the daycares featured in the now viral video. Only one daycare facility answered and said they are a legitimate business.
Have you seen the videos, purporting that some of these daycares don't have kids inside?
Minnesota Republicans say despite the new focus from the Trump administration, they have been sounding the alarm on fraud for years.
We have talked about fraud. We have gotten stories. We've tried to push this forward every way that we can.
At the daycare where Shirley showed back up, a stream of children walk inside.
You're saying that this is a fraudulent daycare. There's kids being dropped off right now.
Yes, the Commissioner of Children literally said a week ago this place was closed.
Did you know
They're
that?
showing face right now.
A viral video, disputed claims, and their full fallout remains to be seen.
It was still some good investigative journalism, though.
On Nick Shirley's part?
That's the guy that exposed everything in Minnesota, right?
I wouldn't say he exposed everything.
I mean, he did. Didn't he expose the whole Minnesota
the
fraud
dude
case? Or am I confusing people?
No, because I think you might be confusing the fact that in Minnesota, the stuff that he was talking about was already being investigated.
So he just amplified it.
He just amplified it. And he also incorrectly amplified it because this dude, because he's not a journalist, doesn't know protocols, doesn't know what to do. So then this dude also just shows up at a daycare and it's like, let me in with a camera. It's like, they were like, no. And they're like, well, you must be doing fraud. It's like, no, you are a grown man with a camera that wants to come in. Yeah. No, that's crazy.
That's an interesting one, though, because if there clearly was something going on there that was wrong. Now, I don't know who hipped him to it or why he did what he did. But what if he heard about it just being in Minnesota and decided to be vigilante?
I think you, once again, this is where journalism comes into play, and do you cite your sources? Do you get background on people? Do you ask the right questions so that you're not, when when you are an independent creator and you're just over here trying to get clicks, you're trying to get clicks. So you ask questions that are going to lead to clicks. You're not necessarily asking questions that get down to the truth of the matter.
He didn't do any investigation.
I don't think he did any investigation. And I also think that, like, he knows what he's doing. Even as someone who seems very dumb, he also knows what he's doing. Like a dumb bully can also be smart about bullying. Some people just have a talent for certain things, right? And so when I look at a Nick Shirley, I'm like, whether he is right about the next story he engages or not, it's how he goes about it. And it's also who he does it to, because it's not journalism is supposed to be journalism across the board. If your journalism is only finding where the fraud is in any brown or black skinned community so that you can perpetuate so you can perpetuate a narrative that all black and brown people are scammers. You look at crack versus cocaine, right? And if we as a country really cared about people doing illicit drugs, why didn't we raid clubs? Why didn't we raid Studio 54? Why don't we raid people on Wall Street? Why don't we raid? We know to keep going to the places where the crack is, never where the cocaine is, right? And that's the sort of like classic Nick Shirley. That's Nick Shirley before Nick Shirley. That's a dude out here, all right, I see these people as villains. So it doesn't even matter that right behind Nick Shirley in a suburban community, you might have all the white collar fraud that you could make content out of for 10 years. We're not going to cover that because that's my neighbor. He's not a criminal. It's these people over here that I got to drive to that are different than me that must be the criminals.
We know it's real, right? Because we know 78 people have been charged, 60 convicted or pled guilty. So when you know that, does the intention, or the why he may have done it or the how he did it, does that matter?
I do think the how matters, because I think the how is the difference between a journalist and between like a troll. Do you know what I mean? Like, because Nick Shirley did not lead to all those convictions. Nick Shirley did not like to me, Nick Shirley is like someone who will go somewhere with a microphone already following a narrative and a story that they've established ahead of time.
Yeah. So you see that, you heard that. That guy is drunk off of haterade, right? He's a full-blown hater of Nick Shirley. He's upset because Nick Shirley is doing what journalists used to do, what CBS is now inspired to do, right? I mean, we have talked about the fraud that's going on out in California with some of the hospice centers. CBS is doing Nick Shirley style journalism, right? I mean, he's inspired at least some mainstream liberal media outlets to get back to what they're supposed to be doing. But for whatever reason, these leftists, these liberal journalists, propagandists don't believe that Nick Shirley is actually doing real journalism, right? That his work is illegitimate or that it should be dismissed because he's quote unquote targeting black and brown people. He's not going after those whites who do coke, right? And I'm like, okay, well, if you believe that, right? If you believe there's white collar crime or, white people doing stuff that, should be exposed, right? Fraud, then how about you go after it, right? How about you cover it? I'm just saying. So with that being said, Nick Shirley is doing the Lord's work, right? He's a patriot, and he also is leading to some of these individuals actually being charged for the fraud, right? Because the same daycare, one of the daycares that he covered, that he exposed, the owner has now been charged with a $4.6 million fraud scheme. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this.
Developments now in Minnesota fraud investigations.
Yeah, that's right. Staying with what Melina had just brought up, a Minneapolis daycare owner already charged in the massive Feeding Our Future scandal is now accused of stealing millions. Here's those details.
Authorities are accusing Fahima Mahmood of submitting more than 13,000 fraudulent child care assistant claims worth roughly $4.6 million between 2022 and 2025. The CEO of Future Leaders Early Learning Daycare in Minneapolis was also indicted in February.
Future Leaders Early Learning Daycare. Now, I guess it's a good thing they didn't spell it as leering, right? They didn't spell it as the Future Leaders Early Learning Daycare Center, right? You guys remember the Leering Center, right? The Quality Learning Center. Yeah, I mean, come on. I think everybody knows what's going on here, right? Everybody knows these operations aren't legit. And I believe that more indictments and charges are coming for certain, right? For a lot of these daycares that were exposed by Nick Shirley, it's just going to take time, right? Because they have to gather the evidence. Like, this stuff is not, it's not stuff that happens overnight, okay? But we are seeing the federal government step it up here and actually start holding people accountable.
Prosecutors say she falsely claimed to serve thousands of meals through the federal nutrition program tied to Feeding Our Future. That's the pandemic-era food aid fraud scheme involving $250 million and dozens of people charged.
Yeah. So is anybody surprised here that this individual was involved in multiple fraudulent schemes, right? So you're talking about government tax dollars going towards feeding people, fraud, right? It ended up being fraudulent. And you're talking about government tax dollars going towards taking care of children, daycare centers, also fraudulent, right? These people, these Somalis in Minneapolis, Minnesota, have literally built businesses, multi-billion-dollar businesses based off fraud, right? And it really should frustrate the average everyday person, because we get out here, you know, we work regular, normal jobs, right? We do the right thing, and we don't become millionaires overnight because of it, right? But you got these Somalis who, you know, come over to this country and they participate in fraud, and not only are they living extravagant lifestyles, they're sending the money to Somalia and is ending up in the hands of terrorists, right? Allegedly. So, again, extremely frustrating.
Leaders Early Learning Center. This building received...
Future Leaders Early Learning was featured in a viral video by influencer Nick Shirley. It showed apparently empty childcare centers and helped trigger a federal response. Following the video, federal officials froze roughly $185 million in childcare funding to Minnesota and deployed thousands of immigration agents to the Twin Cities area. Meanwhile, at a Senate hearing yesterday, a whistleblower testifying they face retaliation after raising concerns about abuse inside Minnesota state programs.
I naively tried to get these problems solved because I thought I should. I was trespassed from my own workplace, and I was a victim of a smear campaign. I was investigated for being, of course, a incompetent employee, but I was investigated for bugging offices, and I was called racist.
A former state investigator telling lawmakers his unit was pressured after documenting alleged fraud involving childcare centers receiving taxpayer money.
A senior DHS official became angry when they reviewed the document and ordered me to delete a number of paragraphs where I described the scope of the fraud. I soon learned that my refusal to hide this information from the auditor angered a number of high-ranking officials, and within days, the same official told me, quote, "You better be ready for the blank storm that's coming your way."
Jay Swanson testifying that some childcare operators paid parents to keep children at home.
What they would do is they would tell the mothers that we don't want you to bring the kids to our child care center. You take care of your kids at home, but we'll pay you. So a mother of 5 children would, be taking in $1,000 a month to take care of their kids at home. And then in order to fulfill the education or work requirement, the child care center would falsify employment documents so the mothers could take those to their caseworker and show them that they were working at the child care center.
Lawmakers say their testimony could shape future oversight in whistleblower protections.
Yeah. So you've seen that you're that. Now, this also comes as the DOJ is announcing more charges, more arrests when it comes to the Minnesota fraud scandal. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Good morning to you all. My name is Colin McDonald, Assistant Attorney General for the National Fraud Enforcement Division at the Department of Justice. I am joined today by a lineup of committed public servants who are devoted to protecting the financial security of America. Today, we are announcing criminal charges against 15 defendants in Minnesota for fraud schemes that targeted over $90 million in taxpayer dollars. Let me be clear up front about something. This is not the end of our work in Minnesota. This is not the end of the beginning of our work in Minnesota. This is the beginning of our work in Minnesota. The fraud here in Minnesota is shocking. Our cases today involve 7 different state-managed Medicaid programs that have been systematically pilfered by fraudsters who treated Minnesota-run programs as their personal piggy bank. One of the programs has been completely shut down because there's no money left. It's all gone. That was Minnesota's state-run Housing Stabilization Services Program, designed to help the homeless find and maintain housing. It was estimated in 2020 that it would cost only about $2.5 million a year to fund this program, but it ended up costing almost 50 times that much, over $104 million by 2024 due to fraud. And because of all the fraud, Minnesota had to shut the program down in 2025, and now these services no longer exist for these vulnerable homeless populations. The same trends exist for other Minnesota-run taxpayer-funded programs. An autism program that cost the taxpayer $600,000 just 6 years ago skyrocketed to over $400 million. And to be sure, that number is not driven by supply and demand. It is not driven by health care or charity. It is fraud. To tackle this crisis, and it is a crisis in Minnesota, earlier this year, the Department of Justice surged 11 strike force prosecutors from across the country to be here on the ground fighting the rampant fraud targeting our taxpayer-funded programs. And large numbers of agents from our partners at the FBI, HHS-OIG, HSI, IRS-CI, and others joined our prosecutors to rapidly unmask fraudulent actors in Minnesota. These agents and prosecutors have been working around the clock to root out the criminals stealing taxpayer dollars, and I am proud of all they accomplished in such a short time. Their hard work made today possible. Make no mistake, today's charges are unprecedented. They include the highest loss amount ever charged in a Medicaid case in Minnesota and the largest autism fraud scheme ever charged by the Department of Justice. The common theme throughout these cases is fraudsters exploiting vulnerable programs and vulnerable people to enrich themselves, no matter the consequences to the programs or to the people. For example, one defendant is charged with defrauding the Integrated Community Supports Medicaid program. This program is designed to help individuals with disabilities live independently. One patient was supposed to be receiving 24-hour care through this program, but he was actually being serviced by a fraudster and received no services. This patient was later found dead. Meanwhile, the architect of this fraud scheme was billing Medicaid as if he was providing care to this patient. The defendant even submitted a claim of over $400 for services he never provided the day before this man died. In another example, 2 defendants have been charged for defrauding a program designed to offer medical services to those with autism spectrum disorder. As alleged, the defendants paid kickbacks to parents who brought their children to autism centers, diagnosed children with autism regardless of medical necessity, and billed for autism services that were never actually provided. In one final example, 2 defendants have been charged in an over $22 million fraud scheme involving the Individualized Home Supports Program. This program was meant to support disabled individuals who wanted to live in their own homes. Instead, these disabled individuals were used like lottery tickets by these defendants to generate millions of dollars, which these defendants used to expand their real estate holdings, purchase luxury vehicles, and splurge on expensive jewelry. We will not, full stop, tolerate this greed and deceit. We will not let fraudsters bankrupt Medicare and Medicaid the same way that they bankrupted the Housing Stabilization Services Program. As mentioned, This is just the beginning. With the support of President Trump, Vice President Vance, Acting Attorney General Blanche, Chairman Ferguson and the White House Anti-Fraud Task Force, Secretary Kennedy, Dr. Oz and his team, and the entire federal fraud-fighting apparatus, the Department of Justice will continue expanding our reach across the country to pursue all fraud, no matter how large, no matter how small, no matter how hard. Since April 1st, DOJ's Fraud Division has announced over 450 fraud enforcement actions nationwide, representing billions of taxpayer dollars. And this week already, we're delivering results coast to coast with a trial conviction in Brooklyn involving a $40 million drug distribution and fraud scheme, and a trial conviction in Los Angeles involving a $40 million Botox injection fraud scheme. To expand our reach, we are announcing today the expansion of the healthcare fraud Midwest Strike Force to Minnesota, and the hiring of 15 additional prosecutors dedicated to combating Medicaid fraud nationwide. These additional resources will ensure that the DOJ's Fraud Division will be better equipped to stop fraud and hold criminals accountable.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that, right? You get the gist of what's going on here. You have more individuals who are charged with fraud, a lot of them, probably Somalis. But we're going to see what more information comes out. In the meantime, you have one of the architects of the massive fraud out in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She is now being sentenced, right? She has been sentenced to prison. She's going to be serving a whole lot of time.
And meantime, on this very same day, the woman convicted as the kingpin at the center of the massive Feeding Our Future scandal is sentenced to 41.5 years in jail. That works out to be a little more than 35 years before she has a shot at parole. Amy Bach is her name. She's also on the hook for $243 million in restitution. And that is the amount of money the court determined was scammed from taxpayers in that Feeding Our Future scandal alone. Amy Bach sobbed in the courtroom before she was sentenced. With shackled hands and feet, she said, quote, "I understand I failed. I failed the public, my family, everyone." Now, in March of 2025, Bach was convicted of mail fraud, wire fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. Prosecutors say she pulled the strings on this pandemic scandal with a program that was intended to feed poor kids during the pandemic. Instead, fraudsters billed Medicaid for meals that were never delivered. Before today, 79 people had been charged with defrauding taxpayers for pandemic money. 65 of them, Bill, have been convicted.
Yeah, Mike, I got to believe that people watch that news conference and were just raging at the screen, learning the details of this fraud and just how deep some of these networks ran. Mike, thank you for the update out of Chicago. All right.
Yeah, huge. Absolutely huge. You know, again, I think this administration deserves credit, to be honest with you, right? I mean, fraud has become a national conversation. It is happening way too much in this country. It is something that Democrats let get out of control, and they will continue to do so, right? Fraud is a part of the business model of the Democrat Party. When you understand that Democrats thrive off of fraud, then you understand why is it that they love socialism so much, right? Because unlimited handouts where you just give money, taxpayer dollars, to all of these entities, right? That is great for fraud, right? And that's great for Democrats because it allows them to maintain power and control, okay? That's what happens. Ultimately, they end up getting kickbacks in the form of votes, in the form of campaign donations. The money trickles back to the Democrats. It keeps them in power, right? It gives them a core constituency for them to appeal to that they've essentially bought with taxpayer dollars. And dismantling the fraud is dismantling what props up the Democrat Party, right? To be honest with you. And this is why Democrats are so furious about this. This is why they're so against this. This is why they're crying racism, hate, and bigotry, because it is a threat to their power, period. Okay? And it's not just the Somali fraudsters that need to be held accountable. Democrats who enable the fraud, like, for example, Ilhan Omar and Tim Walz, also need to be held accountable as well, too. So I am hoping for some accountability for actual sitting Democrat politicians one day, right? One day, hopefully, we will get some real arrests of Democrats, sitting Democrats who enable and allow the fraud to happen. But we'll see. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.